Well, tonight in Pittsburgh, after 2 periods of play, it's time for another edition of Kaiton's Corner back here at the Igloo Mellon Arena. It is time for you to take center stage, and it is your questions that we try to answer on this program, whether you're a new hockey fan, a veteran hockey fan, and we appreciate your input. Just send your question along, whatever it may be, about the NHL in general, the Carolina Hurricanes in particular, anything about statistics, rules, anything that may have you scratching your head if you're a new hockey fan, or if you're a veteran fan, something you haven't seen in a while. Anything is fair game. Just call the shots on this show by sending your emails to Chuck K at CarolinaHurricanes.com. That's Chuck and the letter K at CarolinaHurricanes.com, and I'll answer your question on a future second intermission. All you have to do is provide us with your full name and where you're emailing from, and any good question about hockey, and we'll answer it for you, as we will for Brandon Hitch of Raleigh, North Carolina. What's your thoughts on back-to-back games? Brendan wants to know if the NHL can't avoid them, logistically, at least have both teams coming off a game the night before to make it fair. When a team plays back-to-back against a team that was off the night before and fresh, it's almost a guaranteed loss and a bad product for the NHL, in his opinion. I hope the NHL does something because fans lose interest in watching an unwinnable game. Well, I don't know if it's an unwinnable game. Ask the Minnesota Wild that. Last week they went into Anaheim after losing in Phoenix, and they walked in and beat the defending Stanley Cup champions 2-0. I don't know if I would call it unwinnable. It's certainly unadvantageous, but sometimes when you play the night before, you're actually at an advantage if it wasn't a taxing game and you're fresh. And sometimes the team that's been sitting around for 2 or 3 days is not the fresher team. Witness the fact that the Hurricanes last week played the Ottawa Senators last Thursday night, and the Senators had played in Atlanta the day before, and who was the better team in the first 10 minutes? If it wasn't for Cam Ward, the Hurricanes may have been in some trouble because the Senators really took it to the Hurricanes, even though they had played the night before. So I don't know if I agree totally with your premise, Brendan, that it's an unwinnable game. It turned out the Hurricanes played better as the game went on, but had the Senators scored a couple of goals early, that result may have been different, and they were the team that played the day before. We're going to have that scenario here. The Hurricanes will be going to Philadelphia tomorrow night, so it'll test that theory. But I think it's not logistically possible to make a totally fair schedule. You want to minimize the number of games that are played back-to-back and certainly equalize them team by team. But when the NHL does the schedule, first of all, the computer inputs the number of open dates in each building that the teams provide, and so it depends upon that. So it almost takes a computer today to sort out 30 teams, 41 available dates, and make it a fair schedule for everybody. They throw all that information in, and sometimes it's not feasible to have that perfect schedule that you're talking about. And my thought on back-to-back games, I think that if you have a lot of them in a short period of time. In other words, say a 5-game in 9-day stretch or a 6-game in 9-day stretch, say like the Ottawa Senators went through at the start of the year, then I think it get to be taxing. I think if you play that 5th game in 8 days, that's much more, even though you may have had the day off before, I think that's a lot more taxing, crunching a number of games into, say, a week and a half period of time. If you say play 6 games in 9 nights, that's where it gets to be troublesome. So it's not necessarily the back-to-back games, in my opinion. It's the time of the season that it's played, and of course you're fresher this time of year if you're going to play back-to-back, as the Hurricanes did with the Washington Capitals to start that road trip last week after they played the Penguins at home on that Friday, October the 5th. Yeah, it's a tough scenario, but remember something. In that case, the Washington Capitals played the night before in Atlanta and had the jump, and the Hurricanes just had the jump in that particular game that they lost 2-0. So you really can't say that it's an advantage or a disadvantage. If you do have both teams coming in and playing the night before, as we did, as I told you in that Washington scenario, naturally it's a level playing field, and may the best team win. But there's nothing that can be avoided. I mean, the NHL schedule is very, very complicated and difficult to put together. No one's going to have that perfect schedule, so I understand your point, Brendan, but I don't think the NHL is ever going to get to the point where they can totally equalize the schedule and make sure that both teams have either played back-to-back games when they meet on that second night, or that there will be a preponderance of them. I think they've tried to minimize anywhere from 13 to 18 back-to-back scenarios among the 30 teams, and I know one year the Hurricanes had probably, it seemed like more than anybody else. Well, this year they have a manageable number. So thanks for your question. It's an excellent question. And we have another question as we wrap it up here. Hurricanes scored 7 straight goals, as we know, in that October 9th game in Toronto. And a question from Bob Harris in Raleigh is, what is the NHL record for consecutive goals scored? Well, it happened back in 1944 when the Detroit Red Wings blasted the New York Rangers in the old 6-team NHL in a game in January, 15-0. And the Hurricane record is actually the franchise record of 11 when they beat the Edmonton Oilers as the Hartford Whalers back in February of '84. And that was minus Wayne Gretzky and Yari Curry that night. But still, even if you want to put an asterisk on that, it still was quite an accomplishment in that game back 23 years ago. And as far as the Hurricanes record from the segment of the 10 years of Carolina Hurricanes hockey, that 7 was equaled. The 7 they got the other night against Toronto was equaled back on December 16th of '01 when the Hurricanes whitewashed the Pittsburgh Penguins in Pittsburgh 7-0. It was a game that now assistant coach Jeff Daniels and former Penguin scored a goal in that game. Ron Francis led the Hurricanes with 2 goals and 1 assist. So the record 7. I don't think they've scored any more than 7 since being the Hurricanes, but the Whaler record is 11 and the NHL record is 15. So thanks again to Bob Harris and also to Brendan Hinch with their questions here in Kaiton's Corner. I'm Chuck Kaiton.